The October 25th, 2010 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Esposito. Here. Mr. Hanna. Here. Chairman Howland.
Here.
Mr. Monroe. Here. Mr. McCann.
Here. Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
No, sir.
Is there anyone present who is not signed up to speak who would like to address the committee at this time? The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. You have the September 27th, 2010 minutes before you. They will stand as approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Mr. Clerk.
Referral 10-295, authorized submission.
Moved by Mr. McCann, seconded by Legislator Hanna. Is there any discussion? Legislator Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, if I might, I'd like to ask for a little further description about this referral from the administration.
Through the chair, the United States to make it easier for companies to get into the foreign trade zone. Previously, if a company wanted to get into a particular site, there had to be swapping of acreage. What this will allow us to do is make it site-specific. If a company has a business and is ready to go in the foreign trade zone, it can be done with a minor boundary modification, much like the Empire Zone, a boundary modification, and allow that site to be considered foreign trade zone, following all the rules and regulations of customs.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I appreciate that description. Could you maybe take a step back and just explain to us a little bit more about what a foreign trade zone is and how it's applied to Monroe County?
Sure. Through the chair, a foreign trade zone is a particular area where when product comes in, it's not considered part of the commerce of the United States, and it allows it to not have to pay duty. To put it a little more simplistically, it's kind of a cash flow tool. So, in cases, is that on? Okay. Try the other one. If a particular product has a heavy duty rate, say 15%, and it comes into the foreign trade zone, for example, like a product like titanium or something might have a high duty rate, and then it's 15%. And then it goes into a foreign trade zone and it's put into a product, an airplane engine, and when it comes out, the duty rate can be lower. In this particular case, we know of one company that's looking to use a foreign trade zone, then the duty rate is lowered to 2% as opposed to 15%. It basically helps the company save cash and helps us export more product out of the country.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, so does Monroe County currently have a zone then, I assume?
Through the chair, yes, we do have a zone.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chairman, is it one particular geographic area in the county, or how is it applied?
Through the chair, there are two zones currently, general purpose zones that companies can use. There's one on Breck Street operated by Supply Chain, and then there's one on, foreign trade zone operators, and then there's one on West Avenue, which is Supply Chain. And then large companies such as Kodak and Xerox have their own subzones because they import enough product that it's beneficial for them to have their own zones.
I see.
And recently Gleason is going to reactivate their zone.
I see. And through you, Mr. Chairman, this referral is asking us to convert to an alternative site framework. What kind of framework or implementation do we have now?
Through the chair, the way the zone is set up through the Department of Commerce, it makes it more difficult for companies to get into the zone. So this allows for a company to get into the zone by just doing a boundary modification. In essence, it makes the entire county a foreign trade zone, but then it has to be site-specific to that particular company. Right now, you have to swap out acreage if you'd like a company to be in the foreign trade zone.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chairman, so we say we identify, if we pass this in our part of the alternative site framework, a company or an area that would benefit from being in the zone. We, as a legislature, would just modify the boundaries, or do we have to request to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board to approve those changes?
Through the chair, once we're approved for an alternative site framework, then it just goes directly to the Department of Commerce and the Foreign Trade Zone Board.
Okay, and so through you, Mr. Chairman, those are the two entities then that oversee any modifications we as a county do?
Through the chair, yes. What it does is it makes the process go from 9 months down to probably 30 days. Makes it much more user-friendly for the company.
Okay. And through you, Mr. Chairman, do those entities, either the board or the U.S. Commerce Department, have local representatives that we interact with, or is it based regionally? How do we interact with those organizations?
Through the chair, well, locally, customs, the Border Patrol is in charge of anything to do with the customs of the product entering the United States. And then everything else is done through Washington.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Obviously didn't know much about these beforehand, and I hope that this will be something that we can use to our benefit.
Is there any additional discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Legislator Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick follow-up questions. How many companies, through you, Mr. Chair, excuse me, how many companies currently take advantage of this type of zone?
Through the chair, are you talking subzones would be Kodak, Xerox, and
Just the other two you mentioned?
The other two, they're general purpose operators, so they can have many companies utilize the zone. Probably talking between those two general purpose, maybe 50 companies.
And just another follow-up, Mr. Chair. Approximately, do we have any kind of projection on how this impacts employment in our county?
Through the chair, no.
Not even, excuse me, Mr. Chair, not even what, I guess, expanding the zone might have as an effect?
Through the chair, what it'll do, it will make it easier for those companies that think they want access to the zone. But at this point, if you're talking about people, are they knocking down the doors to utilize the zone? At this point, no. But it makes it more user-friendly for those that might be interested.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The item carries. Mr. Clerk?
Referral 10-316, designate Visit Rochester as the official.
Okay, moved by Legislator Hannah, seconded by Legislator McCann. Is there any discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The item carries. Is there any other matters to come before the committee? There being no further business, the October 25th, 2010 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee stands adjourned. The meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee is scheduled for November 29th, 2010. Adjourned.